time.
Okay, cool.
All right. Hello and welcome to Interviews from My Hometown. My name is Seth, and today we have Mike Wilson. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Seth. Glad to be with you guys today.
Yeah. So, Mike, could you give a brief description about yourself?
Yeah, I'm 5'9", 210 pounds, super strong, a dashing young man. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, like Seth said, my name is Mike. I'm lead pastor of a church called Sage Hills in Wenatchee, Washington. I have been married to my wife, Cassie, for the last 16 years. We have three kids, Matthew, Zechariah, and Carrington. And we absolutely love three things. We love Jesus, we love our church, and we love our family. And so that's a little bit about Mike Wilson.
Awesome. So, Mike, how long have you lived in the greater Wenatchee area?
Yeah, so we're going on 5 years living here in Wenatchee.
Okay. And what is your hometown?
So I was born and raised in Southern California in a place called Rancho Cucamonga. Yes, that is actually a place.
So, what was the early life for you, Mike? I'm talking sports, extracurricular activities, first jobs, fun stuff like that.
Yeah, so I grew up playing sports, martial arts. I love wrestling. I love football. I was never really good at any of that stuff, so I did a lot more studying of those sports than I did actually playing. I was second string in almost everything I did. But I fell in love with Jesus at a young age, and I began to pursue the Lord uh, pretty much from the time I was in eighth grade, seeking the Lord, like in a way that most kids in eighth grade don't do, And I knew that God had called me to be a leader in His church and to lead people to know Him. And so, yeah. So in terms of sports, my extracurricular activities were pretty boring. I wasn't a partier. I didn't get into any of those scenes, mostly because I was too dorky. But so yeah, but extracurricular activities. I love sports. I love church, and I got into martial arts pretty young age, and so yeah, that's pretty much my younger life.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're saying you could really get down and
Well, bro, I don't need to like broadcast it to the whole world, but if I needed to, I could put some people out.
All right. Let me ask about your family, your wife and kids.
Sure.
Um, who are they? What are they like?
Yeah, that's cool, man. No, so Cassie and I have, like I said, been married for about 15 years. We started dating when I was just out of high school, and she was still in high school. She was a junior, and we have been dating. So we had been dating for about 5 years before we got married. And so Cassie and I have been together for 20 years altogether. And so I had just turned 38. And so since I was 18 years old, she's been my girl. Yeah, and so that's my wife. We are polar opposites. We're very, very different, but where we unite really strong. And we unite really strong under the authority of the Lord Jesus. And we unite really strong in the beauty of our differences coming together to parent and love our children and lead our church. Cassie and I practice things together. We do things together, and so that's a little bit about me and Cassie. We have three incredible kids. Matthew is 11 years old. He is our super smart. He's like his mom, super smart, good communicator. He's really gifted athlete, but he's a little more introverted. He can figure things out really quick. He's a little more mechanical. And then we have Zechariah, who's 10 years old. And Zechariah is a mini Mike Wilson. He's the life of the party. He's super smart, quick on his feet. He's a really big kid. He'll probably be somewhere around 6'5" when he's full grown. He's a
Jeez.
big boy, and he's the life of the party. He loves sports, and he's really good at them. And so, yeah. And then we have our daughter Carrington that we adopted. She's 5 years old. We've had her since, I don't know, day 3 of her life. She's only ever known us as her parents, but she is the light of our lives, man. She runs this household. She is in charge. She bosses her brothers around, and she has me wrapped around her little finger. And I'm not ashamed of it. I love that little girl. And all in all, Seth, we love our family and we're super close.
Yeah. Um, Let me ask about your work and what you do at the church.
Yeah, so I'm the lead pastor of Sage Hills Church in Wenatchee. Sage Hills is a 110 year, so actually 112-year-old church in the Wenatchee Valley. It's a massive. Leading that church is a big job. You know, it's an 86,000 square foot building. It has about 27 what you call FTE, which is full-time equivalent employees. It has about 3,000 people who call Sage Hills Church home. And so I have my hands full in the leadership of that church, and I love it. I love that church. Like I've never loved a place before. God has given me such a passion for that place and those people. And so yeah, my job consists of leadership of that building, leadership of that staff. And then my favorite part of my job is I get to weekly stand before the people of God and declare the word of God. And so that sums up my job at Sage Hills Church.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite story from work?
Favorite story from Sage Hills. I do. Oh man, this is, I won't reveal names in the small chance she's listening, but there was a lady who visited our church. She came for the first time. It was the Sunday after the Las Vegas shooting. I don't know if you remember that
Hmm.
story, but pretty heartbreaking time in our country's history. uh, Big mass shooting happens, and she woke up that morning. She was a Buddhist. She doesn't know the Lord, but she said, the way she told me the story was, she fell to her knees after hearing the story of that mass shooting and said, I just want to go somewhere that is talking about this in a group today. And at the same time, I'm driving to church. And on my drive to church, I had a sermon prepped for all week long that I had planned to preach on. And as I was going there, I heard the news report, and I just said, I remember saying this out loud in the car, like, I feel like I need to lead our church in a conversation about this today. And so I got up to preach like I do every Sunday morning. Well, pre-COVID, got up to preach. And when I got up there, I just told the church that today is going to be different than normal, that I am going to be leading our church through a conversation on what's happening in our world. And it's going to be hard for me to do that. And at the time that I was saying that, this gal walks into the church, and she hears me say that. And I see her in the back kind of go like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I just kind of didn't think anything of it. And as I'm preaching through the message, talking through the conversation, I invite the church forward at the end to just close in a time of prayer, and asked if anybody there today needed to dedicate their life to Jesus. And this lady who was a Buddhist came up to me and said, look, I don't know anything about Jesus, but I know this. I asked the powers that be to send me to a place that was going to talk about this today. And I drove past your church and I saw a light on it. And so I just assumed that was God telling me to come. And so I want to be, and she became a Christian that day. It was absolutely incredible. And
Wow.
yeah, that's probably one of my favorite stories. I have a billion other ones, but that's definitely one of them.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you like to do outside of work when we're not in quarantine?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the newest hobby that I have in terms of like the last 5 years is I love to work out. I work out at Actualize Sports and Fitness, and I miss working out. I miss lifting weights. That's probably my biggest I don't know, hobby. Then I love to be with my kids and my family. We like to travel. We love to be together. And so quarantine has been hard, but in the same breath, it's been a nice refresher because I haven't been traveling as much, get to be around the family, and that's really nice.
Yeah. Um, what are some of your favorite spots around town? Um, like restaurants or hiking trails or anything along that lines?
Sure. Yeah, I love I mean, which is crazy. I never thought I would hear me say this, but I do love to hike. It's weird because what's crazy, Seth? Hiking is actually just walking, right? Like
Yeah,
I don't I just wondered if like people when actually didn't realize that because when I moved here, like, oh, the hiking here is incredible, and I'm like, hiking is actually just walking. You know that, right? Like,
it's
but
walking up a
anyways,
slope. That's all it
yeah, and
is.
it's killer hard. But yeah, but I actually have grown to love hiking, and so my favorite trail to hike is Saddle Rock. I love it. And I found a new trail off of Saddle Rock that I hiked last week that was challenging and pretty cool. So Saddle Rock would definitely be on that list. My favorite restaurants in town. Wow, I love Visconti's. But like for just like a faster meal, Walkabout is probably my favorite. So, but then my all-time favorite spot in town is Cafe Mela. When I'm not in my office and it's a weekday, that's where I am talking to our community, loving people.
Awesome. Yeah. So going into that, what is your go-to order at Cafe Mila?
Oh, go-to order. Okay, so it depends. Like, because I go through nutrition cycles. If I'm
Hmm.
in a season when I can eat whatever I want, this is what I'm getting at Cafe Mela. And I'm going to say it and start drooling right now because I'm not in a season when I'm eating whatever I want. But I get a uh, caramel latte. That's heaven on earth. And then I get a bacon, egg, cheese breakfast burrito with no potatoes.
Okay.
That's my dream. If I could eat that every day, I would be as big of a house, but as happy as anyone in the world.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So, something I like to do is I like to ask about the guest's music taste because you can tell a lot by a person through their music taste. So, what are your music tastes? What do you listen to on a daily basis?
well, my staff would tell you like I listen to the same thing over and over and over again because I love worship music. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but I do. I listen to the same thing over and over again. The band People and Songs is my favorite worship group. I listen to the song Psalm 23 by People and Songs at least twice or three times a day. And when I'm in the office, it's worse. I just love them. Caden Slay is my favorite worship artist. Caden and Melanie Slay are just such a gifted group of worship leaders. They're my favorite group. So yeah, but then if I'm in a mood to just kind of detach, I love 90s hip hop.
Okay.
I grew up in an almost exclusively African American neighborhood. Well, not that's not totally true, but there was a lot of African Americans, especially kids my age, African American and Hispanics, and I just got into hip hop, and I love that. So I listen to them a lot more edited now than I used to listen to them,
Mhm.
but I can bust down with some '90s hip hop.
All right. I'll come to you next time I need to make a 90s playlist then.
I'm all over it, bro. I got your back.
So, this is going into kind of more I wouldn't say personal, but kind of deeper questions. Um,
Sure.
what are you curious about right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have never, well, I'm not gonna say never. I've always been one who reads and studies world history. I love history, but I'm really diving into and very curious about this concept of freedom and liberty. It's interesting in times of crisis, like we're in right now, like crisis, like our world has never experienced. I'm not gonna say never, but it's definitely experiencing in a grander scale than anything that I've experienced in my lifetime. What happens to our freedom and our liberties during the season, and so I'm curious about that. I'm curious what the balance is between governmental control and what's right for them to have, and also what is a violation of our First Amendment rights. And so that's what I'm curious about. You asked, you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
um, what is some what do you wish you would have known when you started living in Wenatchee?
that's a really good question. Hmm. You know, I would say this about Wenatchee. First of all, um, I don't ever want to leave this place. Like it is such a weird place, man. Like when I first landed in Wenatchee, after I had done a bunch of interviews, I remember turning to Cassie. We were on an airplane together and saying, I don't know if this is as pretty as everybody thinks it is. Of course, you know where you land in Pangborn Airport.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't get the full picture of Wenatchee. And then we came in on a certain place, and it wasn't what I had expected it to be. And it was just like I wasn't comfortable right away in Wenatchee. But what I've learned over time is that this is like one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It's weird how Wenatchee grows on you. It's like
Yeah.
it's just really strange. And part of the reason for that, Seth, is the people who live in Wenatchee love Wenatchee. They have this sense of like they were born here. This is our town, and we don't want others in it. So what I would say is, I wish I would have known how the folks of Wenatchee, their first impression of you won't be their last impression of you. Meaning, like at first, they're not super kind to outsiders. You know, it takes a little time for people of Wenatchee to warm up. But it was really strange. About year 3 of being here, I found myself, someone had moved around us and they were talking to us and, hey, where are you from? And they're like, we're from, we just moved over from the West Side. And I'm like, why don't you go back? I said that under my breath and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've turned into one of them. Yeah.
All right. What's something that most people underestimate about you?
Uh, that's a good question, man. You know, I'm really hard headed, and there's a great book by a lady named by the name of Angela Duckworth. She wrote a book called Grit, and this book called Grit talks about what it takes to be successful. Like there's one common ingredient amongst successful people that's found in every single person that's successful. And that is this grit, this determination to succeed. And I think because at least when I first started here, my age, because of I didn't have a ton of experience. I think people underestimated my grit, that I was gonna put my foot to the ground, my hand to the plow, and I was gonna plow until something happened because I have grit.
Okay. That's a really interesting answer. I love that.
Yeah.
So what's the best compliment you've ever been given?
This is gonna be kind of funny, bro. Okay. So um and it has to you'd have to understand a little bit more of my story to really truly get that. And I'll just kind of nutshell it for you. Like my dad was very different everywhere he was. He was a lead pastor of a very large church, but he was a different person at home than he was at church and at a baseball game. He was just different everywhere. And I remember how difficult that was for me as a kid. He had a real bad double life. It ended up taking his life. He died because of his double life. But just a couple years ago, my son Matthew was playing football, and I'm a very boisterous football fan. Like I raise my voice, I'll yell at referees. I am. I just how I am. I'm very animated, especially when it's my kids. Like
Mhm.
I'm just very animated. And I don't remember what the whole context of the story was, but I know I was yelling at a referee because he made a wrong call, obviously. And and one of the parents asked Matthew, and I'll bet you I don't even know that he'd remember saying this, but one of the parents asked Matthew, does it bug you when your dad's like that? And he goes, nope, that's just my dad. He's like that all the time. Like, and so I think that's the best compliment I've ever gotten, is that what you see is what you get. Like I'm no different at church as I am at home. I mean, obviously I have different speeds, but I'm pretty passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, regardless of the setting. And like Popeye, I am what I am.
I like
You
that.
wouldn't get that, Seth. You're too young to understand Popeye references.
You'd be surprised. I've watched
Okay,
some Popeye. It's
that's what I'm talking
very
about.
little, but I've watched some. So a way that I like to connect with my guest is I like to hand the interviewing off to my guest, and I like to
Sure.
have them ask me some questions. It doesn't have to be about Wenatchee, even though that's kind of what the podcast is about, but just
Sure.
in general questions.
Yeah. So
What do
Seth,
you got?
tell me about your who do you have your sights on right now in terms of the ladies? I'm just kidding, buddy. Yeah, I'm just kidding with you, bro. So why don't you tell me, Seth? Like, tell me a little bit about how are you growing in your walk with the Lord? I'm your pastor, so I'm going to ask you those questions. But
Yeah.
how are you advancing in your walk with the Lord right now, Seth?
Well, so especially going into this quarantine, my whole kind of like way to keep up with the Lord was going to the church and being with the people that I found have been really kind of impactful in my walk, whether that be a Connor or a Seth or anyone along those lines that I spend hours with. Um, and it's kind of changed because I have had to find other things, whether that be having these Zoom conversations or just going out, taking a walk, and just talking with the Lord.
Amen.
So that's been something
Yeah.
that's changed.
And Seth, you go to the River Academy, right?
No, I'm
Oh,
graduating
you
now.
don't. Oh, you are? I thought you went. Did you graduate from River?
No, I graduated from Eastmont.
Oh, why did I think you graduated from the River Academy? Oh, there goes my next question. Yeah, but so Seth, what do you find yourself most passionate about these days?
Um, it's so my senior year last year, I um was a student at the tech center. I studied cinematography and I got certifications to do cinematography as a career if I wanted to. And that's still something that I find myself interested in, whether that be production of any kind, whether that be hosting a podcast for a living or continuing as a technical person through a church, which is my internship at St. Charles Church right now. So,
Oh, that's right. You intern at St. Joe's Church,
yeah.
which is a great church, by the way. If you don't have a
Yeah.
home church, come to St. Joe's Church. So, Seth, this is a question that I love to ask people, and it's going to be one that you're going to go like, "Oh, I don't know." But so I want you to just put your thinking cap on for a second. Just say for a second, tomorrow you're elected as leader of the free world, president of the United States. What's the first thing you're going to do? What's the number one thing you would change in our world if you could change?
Boy, that's a hard one.
I know.
If oh, it, I don't know. It would probably be um the way this is just going off of what I know currently as just graduating high school and going into the workforce. I didn't go to college. I just went directly into the workforce. I'm finding that people um aren't leaving high school with the correct knowledge that they should be having. So it be how the school structure is set up currently and what
Okay.
they're teaching through school.
Right. That's awesome. Well,
I
great
don't know
question.
how I'm going to do that, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good response, buddy. That's all I got.
All right. So the way I love to end the show is I
Okay.
ask the guest to tell me a joke.
Okay. Hey, Seth,
Yeah.
you want to hear a joke about paper?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. It's terrible. That's a good joke, dude. That's a really good joke. Yeah, it's such a good joke. You're
Oh,
welcome,
thank
audience.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you for listening to Interviews from My Hometown. And Mike, thank you for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
yeah. Cool stuff, Seth. Blessings on you, buddy.
Thanks, man. Interviews from My Hometown is sound mixed by Seth Gamble, hosted by Seth Gamble, funded by Seth Gamble, and is produced by Hometown Productions. Music is by Pink on YouTube.